"Sir, why is there an extra guest in your wedding video?" Grace Miller whispered. The 8-year-old pointed at the frozen screen, her small face solemn beneath the projector's blue light. Vittorio De Luca stopped with his wineglass halfway to his mouth. Behind the bride stood a man no one had invited, one hand flashing a silver falcon ring beside a wall clock reading 6:07. Isabella touched her pearl necklace. "He was probably staff," she said smoothly. Grace raised her old silver camera. Then why was he already behind the locked door? 3 hours earlier, the De Luca mansion still carried the careful shine of a house recovering from a wedding. White roses had begun to brown at their edges. Champagne glasses stood in exact rows on silver trays. Every folded napkin faced the same direction except one near the service hallway, where the fabric had been turned inward as though someone had opened it and hastily pressed it flat again. Grace noticed because her mother had taught her that good service meant seeing what other people left behind. Elena Miller moved quietly between the kitchen and the private screening room, collecting empty cups before the family arrived. Her employee badge, cracked across one corner, swung from a blue cord against her black uniform. Grace sat on a low bench with her scratched silver camera resting in both hands. Elena had bought it used for $12 at a neighborhood thrift store. The battery cover only stayed shut with a strip of clear tape, but Grace loved how the camera made small things hold still long enough to understand. "Stay where I can see you," Elena said, smoothing a crease from Grace's sleeve. "And don't take pictures of guests unless they say it's okay." Grace nodded. She had already taken pictures of harmless things. The leaning wedding cake topper, a row of polished shoes beneath the coat rack, sunlight caught in a serving spoon. Then the service door clicked. Margaret Vale entered wearing a cream suit and white gloves, though the wedding had ended hours ago. Her smile arrived before her eyes did. "Elena," she said pleasantly. "The family wants the room perfect. No interruptions tonight." Elena glanced toward Grace. "She'll be quiet." "Of course." Margaret's gaze rested on the old camera. "Children do have a talent for noticing things that aren't important." She crossed the room and adjusted a white ribbon tied around a floral stand. One glove had a loose thread at the thumb. Grace watched it catch briefly on the ribbon before Margaret pulled free. A small metal charm swung from the ribbon's end, shaped like a bird with spread wings. Margaret tucked it behind the flowers. A moment later, Adrian Cole entered carrying 2 camera bags. He wore the relaxed expression of a man who had spent years making nervous people trust him. He placed one memory card beside the projector, then slipped his hand into the inner pocket of the larger bag as if checking for something. Grace saw a flash of red tape before the zipper closed. "Is that the wedding movie?" she asked. Adrian looked down at her. "The finished version." His smile never changed. "The only version anyone needs." Vittorio entered last. Conversation stopped before he reached the center of the room. At 44, he did not need to raise his voice to control a space. People arranged themselves around his silence. His charcoal suit was unbuttoned, and the silver watch that had belonged to his father caught the light as he took his seat beside Isabella. She wore pearls at her throat and placed one hand over his with practiced tenderness. Grace noticed Vittorio did not close his fingers around hers. The film began with music, laughter, and sunlight pouring through stained glass. Elena remained near the back wall, not seated with the guests, holding an empty tray against her waist. Grace stood beside her, watching the screen more carefully than the people on it. 12 seconds before Isabella entered the chapel, a man appeared in the family corridor behind the flowers. He was there for less than a second. No one reacted. Grace looked down at her camera, searching through the pictures she had taken that afternoon. She found the same shoulder, the same dark sleeve, and the same silver bird on his hand. Then she looked back at the screen and saw the wall clock behind him. 6:07. The guest doors had not opened until 6:20. Grace stepped away from her mother and pointed. Margaret moved immediately, one gloved hand reaching toward the projector remote. Vittorio saw the movement before she touched it. "Leave it," he said. The room went still. Grace lifted her camera, zoomed into the photograph, and felt her stomach tighten. Hanging beneath the stranger's hand was a black security badge with a cracked corner. The name printed across it was Elena Miller. Elena's name looked too large on the tiny black badge, as if the letters themselves had been forced into the photograph. Grace held the camera with both hands while the room seemed to narrow around her. Her mother's cracked employee card still hung from the blue cord against her uniform, close enough for everyone to see. Vittorio looked from the badge in the photograph to the one on Elena's chest. Same name, same black border, same fracture running through the lower right corner. Margaret recovered first. "That proves nothing," she said, her voice calm enough to sound reasonable. "Staff badges are often photographed during setup. A reflection, perhaps. Or the child captured Elena's card on a nearby cart." Elena lowered the empty tray. "My badge never left me." Isabella's expression softened with public concern. "Elena, no one is accusing you." The words were gentle, but they placed the accusation in the center of the room where everyone could see it. "We simply need to understand why your credentials appear beside an unauthorized man." Grace turned toward her mother. Elena's fingers had closed around the edge of the tray so tightly that one knuckle had gone white. "She was in the kitchen," Grace said. Margaret gave her a patient smile. "You cannot know where your mother was every minute, sweetheart." Grace swallowed. The projector fan whispered above them. For one brief second, all she wanted was to step back beside Elena and let the adults make the picture mean something else. Instead, she pressed the button that displayed the photograph's information. The time appeared in small green numbers. 6:11 p.m., Mom signed for the hot trays at 6:10, she said. "I was waiting for her by the warming ovens." Adrian folded his arms. Old cameras. Drift. Sometimes by hours. Vittorio did not answer him. He held out one hand. Grace crossed the carpet and placed the silver camera in his palm. It looked almost weightless against his fingers. He examined the image without changing expression, then saved a copy to his phone. "Elena," he said, "where were you at 6:11? "Main kitchen, sir." "Who saw you?" "The sous chef, 2 servers, the pastry team." Margaret tilted her head. Memory becomes unreliable when people feel threatened. Vittorio's eyes moved to her. "Then we won't use memory." He turned to the head of security near the door. "Check the kitchen footage." Quietly, the man left without a word. No one else moved. Isabella reached for Vittorio's wrist, touching the silver watch that had belonged to his father. "This is becoming cruel," she murmured. The child saw a confusing image. "Elena is frightened. We can handle it tomorrow." Vittorio glanced at her hand until she removed it. "Someone entered a restricted corridor wearing my employee's identity. Tomorrow is late." A server entered carrying coffee, unaware of the tension. The cups rattled softly against their saucers. Grace recognized the young woman from the kitchen and watched her set one cup beside Isabella, one beside Margaret, and none beside Elena. It was an ordinary omission, practiced so often no one seemed to notice. Elena thanked her anyway. Grace reached for a sugar packet and slid it toward her mother, though Elena had no coffee to put it in. The small gesture made Elena's mouth tighten. Then Adrian laughed once, quietly. "We are building a conspiracy around a blurry photograph and a child's recollection." Grace looked at him. "You were there too." His smile held, but only just. She enlarged the left edge of the photograph. In the glass panel behind Luca, Adrian's reflection appeared with one arm extended. His watch face was visible beneath his cuff. Vittorio leaned closer. "What time does that say?" Adrian answered without looking. "Impossible to tell." Grace rotated the image. The hands became clear. 11 minutes past 6. The same time as the camera. The same time as the wall clock behind Luca. Adrian's jaw shifted once. "I move constantly during an event. That is my job." "You told us you never left the chapel after 6:10, Vittorio said. The photographer's eyes flicked toward Margaret, then back. "I may have stepped out briefly." "To receive what?" Vittorio asked. Grace zoomed farther. Between Luca and Adrian was a cream-colored envelope, caught halfway from one hand to the other. Margaret sighed as though disappointed by everyone's lack of sophistication. Vendors exchange payment envelopes all the time. This is exactly why children should not be involved in adult proceedings. Elena finally set the tray down. She is involved because she saw what your people missed. The room changed. Not loudly. Margaret's smile remained, but her eyes lost their warmth. Be careful, Elena. Defensiveness can look very much like guilt. Grace moved closer to her mother until their sleeves touched. Vittorio watched the distance close between them. When the security chief returned, he carried a tablet. Kitchen footage confirms Elena Miller at 6:10, 6:11, and 6:12. She never left the room. Vittorio's gaze settled on the cracked badge in Luca's hand. Then hers was copied. Margaret began to answer, but Grace noticed something at the bottom of the photograph. A white ribbon hung from Luca's wrist, and beneath it was a second black card, partly hidden. She magnified it until one line of text sharpened into view. It was not Elena's name. It was a door designation reserved for the DeLuca family corridor, and printed beneath it were the words, Master Access. Master Access remained on the screen long enough for the room to understand what it meant. The card in Luca's hand had not merely opened a service door. It could unlock the private corridor, the family offices, and the rooms where no guest was ever supposed to stand alone. Vittorio held Grace's camera without moving. His thumb rested beside the cracked battery cover, careful not to touch the screen. How many master cards exist? He asked. The security chief looked at Margaret before answering. 6 active cards, sir. 1 assigned to me, 2 to senior security, 1 to Mrs. Moretti for wedding access, 1 to Ms. Vale, 1 spare sealed in the office safe. Margaret's face remained composed, but her right hand closed over her left wrist, covering the edge of her white glove. Then the card in the photograph may be the spare, she said. Temporary access was issued throughout the day. Weddings require flexibility. Temporary access is logged, Vittorio replied. Of course. Her smile returned half a second too late. Then the log will settle this. The security chief opened the access records on his tablet. A column of times appeared in pale blue rows. Elena Miller's badge had opened the family corridor at 6:09. A MasterCard had opened the same door at 6:10. At 6:11, both cards appeared inside the restricted zone. Elena stared at the screen as if her own name had become a stranger. I was carrying soup trays, she said quietly. I never touched that hallway. The kitchen camera proves it, Vittorio said. He did not comfort her. He did something more useful. He kept the record open. Adrian shifted his weight. Access systems duplicate entries. It happens when doors close slowly. The security chief shook his head. Not across 2 credentials. Grace looked back at the photograph. The cream envelope between Luca and Adrian covered part of Adrian's hand, but his watch remained visible in the glass. 11 minutes past 6. She remembered the warming oven chiming at the same moment because Elena had told her not to open it. The timer had flashed 6:11 in bright red numbers. The oven clock said 11:02, Grace said. Adrian exhaled through his nose. You cannot possibly remember every clock in a building. I remember because Mom burned her finger. Elena looked at her. A faint pink mark still crossed the side of her thumb. The pan slipped when the timer sounded, Grace continued. She wrapped it in a towel. The towel had blue stripes. One of the kitchen servers near the door nodded before realizing everyone was looking at him. That's true. I got her ice. Vittorio's gaze moved to Adrian's reflection again. You said you never left the chapel after 6:10. Adrian adjusted his cuff over the watch. I said I did not remember leaving. No, Grace said. Her voice was small, but it carried because the room had gone silent. You said you never left. Isabella turned toward her with a patient expression polished for witnesses. Grace. Adults sometimes use words differently when they are under pressure. Grace tightened her fingers around the strap of her blue bracelet. He used the same words twice. Isabella touched her pearl necklace. That does not make him guilty. No, Vittorio said. It makes his story unstable. He handed the camera to the security chief. Preserve the original file. No edits. No transfers except through counsel. Adrian's eyes flicked toward the camera bag on the floor. It was the first time he had looked frightened. Margaret noticed and stepped between him and the table with the smoothness of someone rearranging furniture. Before this becomes unnecessarily damaging, she said. Perhaps we should verify whether the image itself has been altered. Children press filters. Files corrupt. Light creates artifacts. Grace shook her head. There's another picture. She took the camera back when Vittorio nodded. Her thumb moved through the thumbnails until she found one she had nearly deleted. Elena in the kitchen doorway, holding a tray while the stainless steel warming oven glowed behind her. The clock read 6:11. In the curved reflection of the oven door, Adrian stood in the service hall with Luca, the cream envelope now tucked beneath his jacket. Between them, Margaret's white-gloved hand was pulling Elena's copied badge through a handheld scanner. Margaret's smile disappeared, only for a second, but Vittorio saw it. And beneath the scanner, clearly visible in the reflection, was a printed label bearing the serial number of the master access card sealed in the office safe. Vittorio looked at the serial number in the reflection, then at the security chief. Open the safe. No one moved for half a second. The pause was small, almost polite, but in a room built around obedience it felt like a door refusing to unlock. Margaret recovered first. The office safe is part of the event security chain, she said. Opening it now, in front of staff and a child, could compromise procedures. Grace stood beside Elena near the back wall, her silver camera pressed against her chest. Around her, dark suits formed a quiet border. She was 8 years old, 5 feet from the screen, and somehow farther from authority than anyone else in the room. Isabella rose from her seat. Vittorio, perhaps counsel should review this privately. Grace has already been exposed to enough confusion. Her tone carried concern, not cruelty, which made the dismissal sharper. She should not be made responsible for accusations she cannot understand. Elena's chin lifted. She understands what she saw. Margaret turned to her with a measured smile. And you are naturally protective of your daughter. That does not make her interpretation reliable. Grace did not look at Margaret. She looked at the photograph. The scanner in the reflection had a small green light near its handle. Beneath it, the printed serial number ended in 419. She repeated the last 3 digits silently so she would not lose them. Vittorio noticed her lips move. What are you memorizing? He asked. 419. Why? Because if the safe card is different, then the picture is wrong. Her fingers tightened around the camera strap. And if it's the same, someone opened the safe. The room quieted. Vittorio turned to the security chief. Open it. This time the man obeyed. 2 guards left for the office while Margaret remained near the screen, one white-gloved hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. Adrian tried to make his voice casual. Even if the numbers match, equipment labels can be copied. Rental companies reuse inventory tags. Vittorio glanced at him. Then you should hope they do. 10 minutes passed. A server removed the untouched coffee. Grace watched Elena fold the loose sugar packet once, then again, making the paper smaller without tearing it. It was the kind of thing her mother did when she was trying not to show fear. Isabella crossed the room and lowered her voice. Elena, this does not need to become a public spectacle. Take Grace home. Your position will be protected while we review everything. Elena looked at Vittorio, then back at Isabella. Protected from what? Isabella's pearl necklace shifted as her fingers found it. From misunderstanding. Whose? Grace asked. Isabella's hand stopped. For a moment, the warmth left her face. This is exactly what I mean, she said softly. A child repeats adult words without understanding their weight. Grace held the camera tighter. I understand my mom was in the kitchen, and her card was not. Vittorio did not look away from Isabella. Neither do I. The guards returned carrying a black evidence pouch and a printed access sheet. The security chief placed both on the table. Inside the pouch was the MasterCard from the office safe, sealed in clear plastic. Its serial number ended in 419. A low breath moved through the room. Margaret leaned closer but did not touch it. Then the safe seal must have been compromised before today. The seal is intact, the security chief said. Logged, signed, and photographed every morning. Margaret's expression barely changed, which suggests a duplicate label, not a stolen card. It was a reasonable answer. Clean, technical. Adrian seized it quickly. Exactly. Someone photographed the card during setup and printed the serial number onto another device. Vittorio said nothing. He took the guest list from Margaret's folder and laid it beside the sealed card. Bring me the original seating chart. Margaret hesitated. This is the original. Grace looked at the printed page. Table 14 showed 9 names. She remembered folding napkins at that table before the ceremony, counting each place because one chair had been missing a gold ribbon. There were 8 chairs, she said. Margaret did not turn. You are mistaken. I counted them. Children miscount. The words came gently, almost kindly, especially when they are distracted. Grace slipped her notebook from the pocket of her dress and opened to a page filled with small circles. She had drawn the tables while waiting for Elena to finish. Table 14 had 8 circles around it. Beside the drawing, Grace had written 8 stars because Elena had promised her 1 cookie for every napkin she folded correctly. Margaret's eyes moved to the notebook and then away. Vittorio studied the page. Bring the 9th chair from storage. Vittorio, Isabella said. This is becoming absurd. Then it will be easy to disprove. A guard returned with a banquet chair bearing the same gold ribbon as the others. Margaret relaxed slightly. There. 9 chairs. Grace stepped closer. The ribbon was tied correctly, but the paper inventory tag beneath the seat was fresh and white, while the tags from the wedding had yellow edges from storage dust. Vittorio crouched, ran 1 finger across the label, and looked at the date printed in the corner. The chair had been entered into the event inventory the morning after the wedding. Margaret drew a quiet breath, then smiled as if the discrepancy were administrative. A replacement after damage, she said. Perfectly routine. Vittorio stood. Then there will be a damage report. Margaret's smile held. Adrian's did not. He shifted his camera bag behind his leg. Grace saw the movement and remembered the flash of red tape beneath the zipper. Vittorio followed her gaze. Open the bag, he said. Adrian spread his hands. There is nothing in there but equipment. Then open it. The photographer unzipped the main compartment and placed 2 lenses, a charger, and 1 black memory card on the table. Grace stared at it. No red tape. No crescenza ped scratch. Adrian gave her a thin smile. Perhaps that settles at least one child's memory. Grace looked at the seam along the bottom of the bag. It was black like the rest, but one section of thread was newer, tighter, almost blue under the projector light. She raised 1 finger and pointed. That part was sewn today. Adrian's hand moved too quickly, covering the seam before anyone else could touch it. Adrian's palm stayed over the seam, his fingers spread too wide to look casual. Vittorio did not raise his voice. Move your hand. The photographer glanced toward Isabella, then Margaret, as if one of them might turn the order into a misunderstanding. Neither spoke. Slowly, he lifted his hand. Vittorio nodded to the security chief. Photograph the bag before you touch it. Every side. Then open the seam under video. The chief placed the bag on the table, called in counsel, and started a continuous recording on a secured device. Grace stood close to Elena, clutching her silver camera while a guard cut 3 stitches with a narrow evidence knife. The false lining opened less than an inch. Inside was a memory card wrapped in tissue and marked with a strip of red tape. A crescent-shaped scratch crossed one corner. Grace pointed before anyone could remove it. That's the one. Adrian's face had gone pale beneath the projector light. It is a backup card. I forgot it was there. You forgot someone sewed it into your bag? Vittorio asked. Adrian looked down. My assistant handles repairs. Name him. No answer came. Counsel slid the card into a clear evidence sleeve and wrote the time across the seal. Vittorio watched every movement. No one copies it on a networked machine. Use an isolated system. Make 2 forensic images. Hash both. Keep the original sealed. The instructions came without heat, which made the room colder. Margaret folded her hands. Even if the card contains unused footage, that does not prove misconduct. Photographers separate raw material all the time. Then the raw material will defend you, Vittorio said. A technician arrived with a clean laptop and portable reader. The first scan showed the card had been reformatted less than an hour earlier, during the screening. Most files appeared empty. Adrian seized on it. There. Corrupted media. That happens. Grace shook her head. It wasn't empty when he closed the bag. Isabella's fingers touched her pearls. Grace, you could not see what was stored on a card. No, Grace looked at Adrian. But he checked it after the man gave him the envelope. He smiled at the little screen. Vittorio remained silent longer than anyone expected. He remembered Adrian at funerals, baptisms, private dinners, always near enough to preserve the family's image and trusted enough to decide what the family would never see. Then the technician leaned closer to the display. The format removed the directory, not everything. There are thumbnails, audio waveforms, and temporary video fragments. He restored a file lasting 7 seconds. The image trembled as though the camera had been lowered too quickly. Isabella stood beside the bridal suite door. Luca faced her from the restricted corridor. No weapon pressed against her. No hand forced the lock. She looked directly at him, opened the door and said, "You get 5 minutes." No one breathed. Vittorio stared at Isabella. She did not deny the voice. She only whispered, "You don't understand what he threatened." The clip froze on Luca stepping inside. At the edge of the frame, a silver serving tray reflected the glow of his phone. Grace lifted her camera. "I took that tray from the other side." Her photograph showed the same curved reflection, clearer than the video. The phone screen displayed a map, its lettering reversed in the metal. The technician flipped the image. Dock 12 East appeared across the glass. Vittorio's silver watch ticked once into the silence. Dock 12 was where 3 family leaders were scheduled to meet the next morning. The technician isolated the damaged audio beneath the clip. Static broke around a woman's voice, but 4 words survived intact. "Use the maid's card." Vittorio did not speak. His eyes moved from Elena's cracked badge to Margaret's white gloves, then finally to Isabella's hand resting on the pearls he had fastened around her neck before the ceremony. When he did move, it was only to slide his phone across the table to Counsel. "Preserve everything," he said. Then he looked at the woman he had intended to trust with his name. "And pull every payment made by Isabella's charity account in the last 90 days. The phone Vittorio had pushed toward Counsel vibrated once against the table, then again. No one reached for it until the attorney turned the screen away from Isabella and opened the first account report. 3 payments had left the Moretti Hope Foundation within 6 weeks. Each had been labeled Event Accessibility Equipment. The largest had gone to a company registered above a vacant storefront in Newark. The invoice beneath it listed a handheld credential duplicator, 6 blank proximity cards, and overnight delivery to Margaret Vale's office. Margaret's expression did not change. "The foundation purchased equipment for volunteer check-in," she said. "That description is broad enough to sound suspicious when removed from context." Vittorio looked at the serial number on the invoice. Compare it to the scanner in Grace's photograph. The security chief enlarged the reflection from the warming oven. The final 6 digits matched. Isabella drew a slow breath. "I approved hundreds of charitable expenses. Margaret handled vendors." Margaret turned toward her with a look so brief it might have been mistaken for surprise. "You personally authorized that one." Vittorio raised one finger and both women stopped. "Separate rooms," he said. "No phones. No conversation between them." His voice remained even. Guards escorted Margaret toward the private study and Isabella toward the library. Adrian was taken to a third room with counsel present. Grace watched the doors close. "Are they going to blame my mom again?" she asked. Vittorio looked at Elena's cracked badge, still hanging from the blue cord. "Not without going through me." It was not comfort. It was a decision. Elena lowered her eyes for a moment, as though she did not yet know whether she was allowed to believe him. Vittorio ordered copies of every access report, purchase authorization, security complaint, and staffing memo from the month before the wedding. He had the evidence room sealed and assigned 2 guards from different teams so no one person controlled the chain. Grace and Elena were moved to a small breakfast room away from the others. Rain began tapping softly against the tall windows. A refrigerator hummed behind the service wall, and somewhere in the kitchen a spoon touched the side of a glass with a thin, ordinary sound. Vittorio entered carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate and set them down without ceremony. Grace looked at hers but did not touch it. "I don't want anything," she said. "Not money. Not a new camera." Her fingers rested on the old silver one. "I just want them to stop saying Mom did it." Vittorio sat across from her. "Then tell me only what you know." Grace nodded. "Mom wrote something before the wedding." Elena looked up sharply. Grace opened her small notebook and removed a sheet folded into quarters. She had kept it because Elena had used the back to help her practice multiplication. On the front was a handwritten security. Warning: Elena had reported that employee badges could be copied if held near a portable reader. At the bottom, in blue ink, was a receiving stamp from Margaret's office dated 14 days before the wedding. "She gave it back," Grace said. "She told Mom not to act like an expert."
Elena's face tictened.
The official report said the system passed inspection. Counsel returned with a digital copy. The paragraph about badge cloning had been removed. In its place was a line stating that Elena had repeatedly misplaced her credentials and required monitoring. Vittorio read the sentence twice. "Did you ever lose your badge?" "Never." "Were you warned about it?" "No." He compared the metadata. Margaret had edited the file 43 minutes after Elena's report was received. Another vibration sounded from the phone. The technician had identified the damaged female voice from the recovered footage. It matched Margaret's recorded staff training sessions, including the exact phrase, "No one will look twice." Vittorio closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, Isabella was brought back alone. She saw Elena's report on the table and touched her pearls. "Luca threatened me," she said. "He had photographs from years ago. I opened the door because I wanted him gone." "And the scanner?" Vittorio asked. "Margaret arranged it. The money came from your foundation. She told me it was equipment." Grace looked at Isabella's hand. "You touch your necklace when you lie." The room went still. Isabella lowered her fingers. Under separate questioning, Margaret was told Isabella had already confessed. She denied everything for less than 3 minutes, then admitted cloning Elena's badge and altering the report. "It was practical," she said. "If the entry was discovered, suspicion needed somewhere harmless to land." Vittorio stared through the glass toward Elena, who sat with Grace beneath the yellow kitchen light. He had spent years believing danger would come from men who carried guns, rivals who raised their voices, enemies who announced themselves. All that time, a woman in a black uniform had warned his house exactly where it was vulnerable, and the people he trusted had turned her warning into evidence against her. He had not merely failed to see Elena. He had allowed his entire system to decide that her life was the safest one to sacrifice. Vittorio remained at the glass long enough to watch Elena fold Grace's security report back along its original creases. He did not apologize. An apology without protection would only ask the injured person to make him feel forgiven. Instead, he turned to counsel. "Move the real Doc 12 meeting. Different site, different hour. Tell no one outside this room." By midnight, a false schedule had been prepared with 3 deliberate errors. A container number that did not exist, an arrival time 23 minutes late, and an entrance route used only by Margaret during private events. Vittorio printed a single copy and placed it face down inside a cream envelope. The room had grown colder. Rain traced narrow lines down the windows, and the old clock above the fireplace counted each second with a dry mechanical click. Isabella believes Luca came only for leverage, Vittorio said. Margaret believes Isabella has confessed. Adrian believes the deleted footage protects him. Let each of them keep believing something different. His consigliera studied the false route. And the child? Grace is not part of the operation. Vittorio's answer came immediately. She stays with her mother under protection. In the breakfast room, Grace sat with her knees tucked beneath the chair while Elena repaired the loose clasp on her blue star bracelet. Vittorio entered carrying the sealed envelope but did not show her the contents. I need one memory, he said. Nothing more. Grace looked up. About Margaret? About the photograph. Her hands. Grace pictured the warming oven, the silver reflection, and the scanner held near her mother's copied badge. She wore white gloves. All day. Almost. Grace touched the star bead while she searched the picture in her mind. At the flowers, too. One glove had a string hanging from the thumb, caught on the ribbon. Vittorio asked no second question. He returned to the screening room and enlarged Grace's original photograph. The scanner was partly hidden, but the glove around it showed a loose thread at the right thumb. Counsel photographed the detail and added it to the evidence log. Then Vittorio began the test. Isabella was told he had accepted her claim of blackmail and intended to protect the family from scandal. Margaret was told the Doc 12 meeting would proceed because canceling it might alarm rival families. Adrian was told the recovered files were too damaged to establish anything beyond doubt. The false schedule remained inside Vittorio's study, visible only beneath the glass top of his desk. Margaret was brought in alone. I need the wedding vendor files, Vittorio said. They are stored in the cabinet behind you. She crossed the room, past the desk, and opened the cabinet. Her hand paused on the brass handle. The tiny red light on a concealed camera blinked once. She did not look directly at the envelope. She only shifted her body so its reflection appeared in the polished cabinet door. Anything else? She asked. No, Vittorio's voice stayed quiet. That will be all. Margaret left without touching the desk. For 6 minutes, nothing happened. Then the camera outside the florist's storage room recorded her entering with an empty white box. Grace and Elena were already behind a locked door on another floor, watched by 2 guards from separate teams. Vittorio viewed the feed beside counsel. Margaret removed her gloves, revealing a faint indentation where the loose thread had pressed into her thumb. From beneath a layer of wedding ribbons, she lifted a small black phone no larger than her palm. Its screen lit the underside of her face. She photographed the false schedule's reflection from the cabinet glass and typed the non-existent container number. The message uploaded slowly. 10%. 34. 68. Margaret stood motionless while the phone transmitted, one bare hand resting on the lid of the flower box. At 92%, someone knocked in the hallway. Her fingers stopped above the screen. The camera light blinked again. She turned toward the door, listening. No second knock came. The upload completed. A reply arrived almost immediately. Confirm Vittorio inside before Luca moves. Margaret deleted the message, replaced the phone beneath the ribbons, and walked out carrying the same empty box. Vittorio did not order her detained. Track the number, he said. Let the false route travel. Near dawn, Grace woke when the guarded breakfast room door opened. Vittorio stood there, still in his charcoal suit, the silver watch bright against his cuff. He placed a printed photograph on the table, not of a criminal, not of a weapon, but of Margaret's white-gloved hand holding the secret phone. The loose thread at the thumb was clearly visible. Grace looked from the picture to Vittorio. You believed me? I believed what you remembered. In the hallway behind him, Margaret had stopped walking. She could see the photograph between them, and for the first time her polite expression failed completely. Then Vittorio's phone vibrated. The tracker on the false container number had activated at Dock 12 East. The tracker pulsed once on Vittorio's screen, a red point moving along the eastern edge of Dock 12. He watched it for 3 seconds, then locked the phone and turned to his consigliera. Take him alive. Preserve every device before anyone touches it. No raised voice. No visible anger. Only a colder kind of certainty. By sunrise, Luca Ferraro was in custody inside a secured port office with a listening device, a printed map of the false route, and the black phone that had received Margaret's message. Vittorio did not go to the dock. He returned everyone to the private screening room where the lie had first been defended. Isabella sat beneath the wedding portrait in the same pearl necklace. Margaret stood near the projector, her hands bare now. Adrian remained beside counsel, pale and silent. Elena was offered a chair at the front rather than a place against the wall. Grace sat beside her, the old silver camera resting in her lap. Vittorio stood behind the last row. "Play it," he said. The wedding music did not begin. A black screen appeared with a single white timestamp. 6:07 p.m. Luca entered the restricted corridor. At 6:09, Elena's cloned badge opened the door, while kitchen footage showed Elena lifting a tray 30 yards away. At 6:10, the master card registered beside it. At 6:11, Grace's photograph captured Margaret's gloved hand holding the scanner, Adrian receiving the cream envelope, and the 3 clocks agreeing. At 6:13, the guest list file was edited to add Leonard Crane. At 6:16, Isabella opened the bridal suite door and gave Luca 5 minutes. At 6:18, the silver tray reflected Dock 12 East from Luca's phone. No one interrupted. The next image showed the red tape memory card hidden inside Adrian's bag, followed by the forensic record proving it had been erased during the first screening. Then came the invoice for the card duplicator, paid through Isabella's charity account and delivered to Margaret's office. Elena's original report appeared beside the altered version that accused her of mishandling her badge. Margaret looked away first. "The report was administrative," she said. "The system required a plausible explanation if irregular access appeared." Vittorio's face did not change. "A plausible explanation," he repeated. Grace lifted her notebook. "She means Mom." Margaret's eyes moved toward her. "You do not understand organizational liability." Grace opened the folded report and placed it on the table. "I understand she warned you before the wedding." The room went silent again. Counsel played the hidden camera footage from Vittorio's study. Margaret photographed the false schedule. Her secret phone displayed the non-existent container number. Her voice transmitted it to Luca. Then the Dock 12 arrest footage appeared. Luca stepping from a black sedan, checking the fake route, and placing a listening device beneath the empty conference table. The serial number on the device matched a purchase made through his shell company. Isabella went pale. "He told me he only wanted the old photographs destroyed." Counsel displayed Luca's phone backup. Her messages filled the screen. She had chosen the wedding date because all 3 family leaders would be in the city. She had sent the port schedule weeks before Luca threatened to expose her. She had written, "Once he has the route, I am free." Vittorio did not speak. His eyes remained on those words while the silver watch on his wrist ticked into the silence. He had trusted Isabella with his home, Margaret with his security, Adrian with his family's memories. Elena had warned them, and he had never known her report existed. Grace had shown him the truth, and the first instinct of every powerful adult in the room had been to make the child smaller. For several seconds, Vittorio could not speak at all. Then he removed his family signet ring and set it beside Elena's cracked badge. The sound was barely louder than the projector fan. "You chose her name," he said to Margaret, "because you believed poverty had no witnesses." He turned to Isabella. "Fear explains why you opened the door. It does not excuse who you pushed through it." Adrian lowered his head. Margaret's composure finally broke at the edges. Isabella touched her pearls, then stopped when she saw Grace watching. Vittorio placed Luca's phone, the red tape card, Elena's original report, and Grace's silver camera in one straight line across the table. He looked at counsel. "Seal the room. Preserve the chain. Send the complete file to independent authorities." Then, without looking away from the people who had built the lie beneath his roof, he added, "No private settlement. No erased record. No one leaves protected by my name." No one left protected by Vittorio's name. By noon, independent counsel had transferred the sealed evidence to federal investigators, the Port Authority, and the Financial Crimes Unit. The original red tape memory card remained inside a tamper-evident sleeve, logged beside Luca's phone. The cloned badge data, the card duplicator invoice, and Elena's unaltered security report. Grace's silver camera was photographed, copied under supervision, and returned to her only after every original file had been preserved. Luca Ferraro was charged in connection with unlawful access, attempted theft of protected commercial information, electronic surveillance, and conspiracy. Margaret Vale was removed from every DeLuca property before sunset. Her access credentials were revoked, her office was sealed, and investigators opened a case into the altered records. Cloned employee badge and route leak. Adrian Cole lost his contracts with the family and several partner businesses after admitting he had accepted payment to erase footage. His statement was recorded formally, not traded for silence. Isabella's authority over the Moretti Hope Foundation was suspended by its board. The charity accounts were frozen for review, and Vittorio's attorneys began the legal process to end the marriage before it could be completed on paper. He refused the private agreement her lawyers offered. There would be no payment in exchange for sealed testimony, no statement calling the incident a misunderstanding, and no version of the wedding film in which Luca simply disappeared. 3 days later, the mansion staff gathered in the same screening room. Elena stood near the wall out of habit until Vittorio pulled a chair into the front row. "Please sit, Ms. Miller," he said. He did not call her Elena as though familiarity could erase what had happened. On the screen appeared her original report, including the warning that portable readers could copy employee credentials. Beside it was the altered version that had falsely described her as careless. Vittorio faced the staff. Elena Miller identified the security vulnerability 14 days before the wedding. Her report was suppressed, her record was falsified, and her name was used to conceal a crime committed under my roof. He paused. Elena's hands rested still in her lap. I failed to build a system that protected the person who told the truth. That failure was mine. The corrected report was entered into her personnel file. The false warning was deleted with an audit record showing why. Elena was offered a salaried position as compliance and staff safety coordinator, reporting directly to independent counsel rather than household management. The role included health insurance, paid leave, formal training, and authority to halt any event when access procedures were violated. She read every page before signing. No one hurried her. Vittorio also established a protected reporting system with automatic timestamps, outside legal review, anti-retaliation rules, and dual authentication for every restricted door. No manager could edit or erase a complaint alone. Grace's name was entered into the evidence record as the person who supplied the original photographs, not the maid's daughter, Grace Miller. When the meeting ended, Vittorio placed Elena's cracked badge on the table beside a new one bearing her title. "The old card belongs in the record," he said. "The new one belongs to you." Elena looked at him carefully. "And if I report something you do not want to hear, then the system should make it impossible for me to pretend I didn't hear it." Grace held her repaired camera against her Blue Star bracelet. The technician had replaced the battery cover but left the crescent scratch untouched. "Can Mom open the main door now?" she asked. Vittorio looked toward the entrance staff had always been expected to avoid. Yes. That evening, Elena used her new badge at the front entrance. The lock turned green. No guard redirected her toward the service hall. Grace stepped through beside her, then stopped and raised the silver camera. Vittorio stood several feet away beneath the chandelier, his charcoal suit suddenly too formal for the quiet moment. Grace took one photograph. "What did you see?" he asked. She lowered the camera. "A door that finally opened for the right person." Vittorio said nothing, because the smallest voice in his house had already said enough, and this time everyone had listened.